Welcome back to a brand new episode here on Feather Nest Studios, where our magic combined to create beautiful, beautiful miniatures. So in today's video, I'm going to be showing you guys how I made the little furniture that goes into the entrance hall of the Spellman Mortuary Dollhouse. And so if you guys have seen the series, The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, then you will recognize where my project comes from. And in the very first episode of that show, she comes in and she turns the radio on with her magic, and then she dances up the stairs. And so I wanted to make the little radio, make a stand for it to go on, and make some umbrellas, and just start the process of putting furniture in. So this is like my first furniture to go into this house, and so I'm really excited about how it turned out. So I made this little table and radio, as you guys can see. This is just made from mat board and foam board, popsicle sticks, and some wooden blocks, and then also some beads for the little buttons. And then I also made some umbrellas, and these are just this is actually from my dog's poop bag. Not used, of course, and a toothpick and some clay. So these are really simple everyday items. So, if you guys have a dollhouse, I would love for you to use any of the things that I teach you. Please tag me in it so I can see it. But the whole reason I started this channel was because, I learned almost everything from YouTube, and I always wanted to share that back. So that's why I'm just really excited about this whole project, and I'm excited about sharing it with you guys, even though learning the YouTube part of it is a whole different ballgame. But I'm so happy to have you guys here, and without further ado, let's get crafting. So to start off this project, I'm pulling out all my scrap pieces of foam board, and I always keep these from the little windows and doors that I cut out because they're always useful for something. And I found a piece that I wanted to use for the tabletop. So all I'm doing is just taking two pieces of foam board and gluing them together to basically make the meat or the skeleton of my little table. And then next I'm using mat board to cover up the foam board, because if you know, foam board has the soft middle, and so it's really hard to get clean sides. So what I'm doing is basically covering that with mat board. So I'm measuring all the sides of my little piece, and then I'm just scoring the mat board so that it's easy to bend. And you'll see that in just a second what I mean by that. But mat board is a really, really great medium to use, and I know everyone's different. Some people like actual wood, some people prefer to use clay, but I'm a really big fan of using mat board for these little projects. And then scoring it is just cutting the first layer so that it's easy to fold the mat board. And as you'll see, is I make sure that it fits onto my piece. And sometimes I do have to readjust and, whether that be adding a little bit to make sure that it fits. But usually once you put glue down, it's pretty good. And then for the last bit, I'm going to be cutting out a larger section, which is going to be the tabletop. And once you put Mod Podge onto the mat board, it definitely hardens where it feels as if it's wood. Now, in order to get the drawer effect, I'm cutting out a piece of mat board, and that's basically going to be the face of the drawer. But I didn't want to actually make a working drawer inside of this little table because it's going to be in a spot in my project that's really, really hard to reach. Because once I have the staircase in that intersection, or that in the entranceway, I'm not going to be able to reach for it. So for me, I did not care if it was a working drawer or not, but you could always make one just by hollowing out your foam board and creating pieces that go inside. But for this one, I'm just making a simple face. And now for the legs, I'm just gluing together popsicle sticks. Now, if you can go to your local craft store and get smaller wood blocks, that's probably the better way to do this, just because it's easier to make sure it has an even sides. And I do sand it down, as you guys can see. But basically, yeah, it's just popsicle sticks glued together until I got a thickness that I liked. And then I'm using wood glue to glue down the table legs. And it does kind of get a little finicky. You do have to watch it while it's drying to make sure that it dries upright. And one of my legs actually dried a little bit sideways. But again, because this project's going to be pretty much hidden and I'm going to be gluing it in, I wasn't too worried. I was more wanting to make sure it just stood upright and it didn't look lopsided and that it really fit the project. So just with these, just be a little bit careful and mindful as it dries to make sure that they're all upright. And so while that's drying, I'm going ahead and starting the process of the radio. And so for this, I'm just taking 2 blocks of wood that I got from the dollar store and I'm gluing them together to make this rectangular shape. And then I'm using mat board to basically cover the surface areas of the radio, the outside and including the face of the radio. And for this, I'm just cutting out tiny pieces and I'm just gluing it with regular Elmer's glue. And then later on, I'll be adding details to make it look more like a real plastic piece and not like a piece of paper. And for my little desk, I'm making sure that I'm reinforcing all of those legs. And by doing that, I'm just gluing down some extra pieces along the where I have it glued so that they're stronger at the bottom. But I'm also adding those same pieces onto the sides of the legs as well, just to make sure that that helps keep it upright and make sure everything's in place and it has more than one glue point. So as you can see, this is what I ended up with before beginning the painting process. Now for this, I didn't see in the show exactly what the piece looked like, but I think it was brown, but I wanted some more color in it. I'm very much about color, and so I just kind of made up this color by mixing together a bunch of weird colors until I got one that I felt would go really well in that room. So I just start off by painting the basic layer of green over the entire piece. And as you can see, I did not put a piece of mat board on the back of it because I know I'm gluing that to the project, so no one's going to see it. So I just went ahead and didn't put a piece of mat board. But of course, if this is an independent piece that you're making, you'll want to cover the whole thing with mat board. And then for the radio, I'm going to be painting that silver and blue is what I decided for the other piece. But silver metallic paint is a great way to make something look like it is not just paper and that it's actually a real piece. And then of course I always like to age things because I think that makes it look realistic. And basically aging is just taking a darker color and just putting it into all the cracks and creases of your project so that it looks like people have been using that drawer and dirt is just getting trapped in the corners of it. But then I also go in and add more colors. Like I go in after I age it and add some white, and that helps just pop out the areas that I want to pop out. And kind of a rule of thumb with my art is I put shadows where there's a crease or depth, and then I put white where something's popping out, and that just really helps the eye see it all, especially in a little tiny project. It really makes it stand out. Now to do the face of the radio, I decided to do it a yellow color. And to be honest with you guys, if I could go back, I probably would have done it more of a cream color. But it worked out. I kind of left the black, as you can tell, I still had some black on my brush because I thought that made it look older. And then I decided just to paint out the little radio speaker, because again, this part of the project's not really going to be seen except for through windows and through doors. But another way that you could do this is, you know, those little tiny screens that you get with your headphones, or I think they do it for tobacco pipes. You could get something like that and cut it out to use it as a speaker instead if you want something to look more realistic. But again, I was just kind of trying to get the look of it. And I wasn't really sure what the radio face would look like, so I just kind of made up my own thing for it, and I'm pretty happy with how it came out. But there's a million things you can do to make this more exciting. And then, of course, for my little handles, I love to use beads. I think beads are a wonderful tool in miniatures, and this is a great way to create the illusion that you have a handle without trying to figure out how to make a little handle yourself. And I also put beads on the radio to give it like knobs for turning and tuning the stations. And then for the antenna, I just took a piece of wire that I had from one of the ribbons that I had cut. Again, you could also use a paper clip for this, but I just glued it down using regular Elmer's glue, and that actually has held really, really well. And it might be because it's such a small wire, but that way I just gave it that old antenna radio look. And now it's time to start making the little umbrellas, which was probably my favorite part. But I'm using paper clay for this. I know you could probably use polymer clay too, but I do think that you have to bake that. So paper clay is a great way to combine that with things that cannot be put in the oven. Though I think toothpicks can be put in the oven just fine, I think. So don't claim that, I don't really know. But I'm using basically the paper clay at the end to be the handle for my umbrellas. And then once I'm happy with those, I go ahead and start making the base of it. I wanted the base to kind of look like it was almost handcrafted, and maybe it had withered a little bit, and that it was an old just umbrella bucket. And so for this, I used the paper clay again, and paper clay does take time to dry. I think it's about 24 hours for it to fully dry. So even though you're going to see me paint immediately after this, just know that it does take time. So it's good to have multiple projects going at once so you're not completely waiting on things to dry. But that is how the process went. And it did take me actually quite a bit to get this where I wanted it. And I had to cut out a lot of that footage because you guys don't want to see me just messing up all the time. But I really had to work it over and over again to make sure it looked right. And it also was weighted enough to hold up the umbrellas, because the very first one I made was not, and I had to end up remaking it. But in the end, I'm really happy with the way it turned out. And for the umbrellas, I'm just painting them a simple brown. And again, if I could go back, I'd actually probably paint them a darker brown just because I think that would have looked better, but it is what it is. I mean, you can really make these projects as detailed and in-depth as you want them. And of course, I can always go back and fix it if it really bothers me, but I really do like the way my umbrellas came out. And then for the actual umbrella part, I went back and forth on how I wanted to create this. And I eventually found the little poop bag that I had. It was right next to me, and I thought maybe this could work, and it really did. So I took that poop bag and I cut it up, and then I'm using some E6000 glue, and I'm trying to basically fold it onto itself, kind of like an umbrella would be if it was rolled up, and using the glue for that. Now, there might be a better glue for you to use, because in the end, it definitely, you can, if you look at it up close, you can see little bits of hardened glue, but you know, from afar, you really can't tell. So if I was doing something that would be in the front and center of my project, I'd maybe try to use like an Elmer's glue. but I'm not sure how well that would do with the plastic. And E6000 is great for any type of plastic that you need. But all in all, it really did what it was meant to do. It was just folding over the sides of it and just rolling it in my fingers, trying to get it that umbrella-like shape. And I felt like I definitely had an easier time with the second one than I did the first one. And so sometimes it's just like that, where you have to experiment and keep trying to find out what really works for you and what you like and how you want the project to look. And then at the very end, I took a little tiny strip of the plastic and I just wrapped that around the umbrella because, well, one, actual umbrellas do have that piece that they wrap it around with, but I also just wanted to make sure that it wasn't going to unravel as it was still drying. And then so once I had all of that complete, this is what my little umbrellas look like. For you guys today, and thank you so much for joining me on this little adventure we just went on. And I hope you guys like the little furniture, and I'm excited to make more furniture because we have a whole house to build. I am still working on the very first level, but as I am doing this, I actually already built a second room. I've done the windows and the panels. So those are all things that I have to share with you in the future. So make sure to come back for the next video where I'm going to be showing you guys a brand new room that I made within the Spellman house. And I think it's a really neat room because it has a mural, it has some weird windows inside the dollhouse, and it has a little fireplace. So until next time, happy crafting!